Hello, everyone. Welcome to AI Horizons. My name is Mary Purk. I'm the Executive Director and co-founder of AI at Wharton. And today we are going to talk about a recent report that AI at Wharton produced in collaboration with GBK Collective. It's called Growing Up, Navigating Gen AI's Early Years. And I'd like to introduce the other co-authors that produced this with me. Jeremy Korst, he's the partner of GBK Collective. Stefano Puntoni, he is the professor of marketing at Wharton. And Jeremy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. GBK Collective, very proud to collaborate on this report. We are a strategic insights and analytics firm that partners with top academics in client engagements to work with Fortune 500 brands. So yeah, very excited to be part of this.
Hi, everybody. My name is Stefano. I'm one of the co-directors of AI at Wharton, trying to support business and academic stakeholders in their learning about the impact of AI in business. And it's been a real pleasure to work with GBK Collective on this project. It's actually the second year we're doing this, and I think we have really interesting set of results to share. I think just to take a second to explain what might make this research special, I believe it's our wide industry focus. We're looking at a lot of different elements around Gen AI adoption, and we take a neutral perspective as an academic observer. We also take a rigorous approach to measurement and inference, and maybe most interesting, perhaps, compared to a lot of reports that you might find in your inbox about Gen AI. We already have two waves, so we are able to now start calculating year-on-year changes, which I find very fascinating.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this year's report. As Stefano mentioned, this is the second year, so we're going to be able to show some comparisons. And so in particular, the objectives for this report were to really take a pulse on the adoption of Gen AI across multiple industries and multiple departments. We really, along with that, we wanted to identify how it was affecting employees and what that impact was, both to leaders and to the industry and to the employees. We wanted to assess the investments companies were making, and then most importantly, understand the leading use cases and gather some insights from that. This is a US only report or survey. It's all regions. We surveyed over 800 companies, and it's very recent, took place in July of 2024. Some of the survey criteria included companies with 1,000 employees or more. We interviewed only senior decision makers, and again, as I mentioned, the major functional areas. So I'm excited to start to explore what some of these findings were from this report. And what we found is that we are definitely, once again, moving from a new stage, which is last year, we were able to classify everything more in a trial stage, and we will be able to show you data why we thought it was in a trial stage. But this year, in 2024, we moved to experimentation. As you all know, ChatGPT came onto the scene in November of 2022. It's only really been 2 years since it took the world by storm. And so I have been able to encapsulate a lot of the insights into these 3 stages of trial, which is basically in 2023. This year, where more companies are experimenting with the technology and now looking forward to adoption and deployment, which we don't know, but we assume this is going to be more than a year's length of time. So we've categorized it into these 3 areas, and most importantly, also noting that ROI is coming into many of the conversations, as you would expect, when a company is moving more from an experimentation to an adoption and deployment. So more of that ROI connection between the technology and what it would produce in terms of outcomes. So with that, I'm going to invite Stefano to help us uncover some of the rationale for this categorization and some of the insights that you can take away from this report.
Thank you, Mary. Let's get into some of the numbers. In this slide, what you see here are self-reports of adoption rates. Basically, it's a number of people who said in the survey that they use generative AI in their work at least once a week. You have two bars to pay attention to. The dark blue bars are the data from 2023, and the lighter blue bars are the data from 2024. First thing is interesting to look at the first two bars, the total, and you see across the board a massive leap in adoption, while in 2023, about a third of the sample said they were using Gen AI at least once a week at work. That has now gone, it's over 2/3, so 72% now say that. Obviously, we don't know what exactly they are doing in their work, and we expect that there will be wide heterogeneity in the extent to which people have really truly embedded these technology in a lot of their work practices. But certainly these numbers suggest a fast learning curve and a lot more, let's say, comfort and experience with this technology across many people here in the sample. Now, if you look at the remaining bars, these are sliced by function. We have a lot of data, so we can slice the data set in a lot of different ways, which we do in the report. Here, today, we're only gonna show you some highlights, but we do point you to the full report if you want to get more insights. But looking at the functions, if you look at the dark blue bars, the 2023 data, we observed the very big differences between different functions. For example, IT were already adopting the rate of basically 2/3 of the sample, while other functions, for example, marketing, only 20% were adopting in 2023. And as you will see in the use cases, a lot of important use cases are in the marketing area. And Jeremy and I were concerned after the 2023 survey about that gap between impact and experience. And so we wrote an HBR article on inviting marketing professionals to learn and experiment with Gen AI and catch up. And we were delighted this year to see that they are. So across the board, the functions that were lagging behind have been catching up very fast. And while all functions are adopting at a higher rate in 2024 than 2023, the gap between the higher adopter and the lower has shrunk considerably, such that now basically at every function we are at least at 50% of the sample adopting. Now, in the 2024 report, we added two new functions, finance, accounting, and legal, and therefore for those ones you only have the 2024 data there, but you see that those functions are adopting at a very high rate too.
Stefano, when I first saw this, I was a bit surprised initially about purchasing and procurement being the leading function in the organization reporting adoption. And we even got some related questions on LinkedIn when we post. And when I step back and think about this, perhaps it's because all of these other functions are going to their procurement peers talking about some of these new technologies. And those professionals are simply out trying to get to understand how they're being used, who are they, and those types of things.
Okay, so looking at the use cases in more detail, leading on this idea that all the departments are coming to procurement to ask for access somehow. Well, here basically we tested a lot of use cases, and I should say that this is a necessarily arbitrary list, and probably you could have framed these things differently. You could have included other use cases and framed them in different ways. So it's just a snapshot, but I think it's an informative one. And a few things to note. The first one is to point to the top three. So the most adopted use cases, we are talking about basically 60% upward. And here are document and proposal writing and editing, data analysis, analytics, and document and meeting summarization. To me, this is interesting because these are things that every office worker is doing. Everybody's writing some report, everybody's handling some data, and everybody's going to meetings. So I think it's an illustration of just how powerful this technology is in reshaping the world of work. And in a way, economists like to talk about general purpose technology when thinking about AI, and this is really bearing that out by showing just how, general skills or tasks, to be more precise, have been affected by Gen AI. Now, if you start going down the list, you see a mix of general work like email generation, but also more function-specific work. And as a marketing professor, I am interested particularly in the amount of marketing-related use cases that we see in the first, let's say, column here. So marketing content creation, personalized marketing, customer service, customer research, all of that is basically relating to marketing activities. And I think it's really interesting, and it shows how much the function is going to be transformed. Just another couple of things to note, and we will not have the time now to go into every single use case here in detail, but It's interesting to note first the relatively narrow band. I mean, there is a ranking in the level of adoption for different use cases, but the band from the minimum to the maximum is not very large. So we go from 40% to 64%, basically. So that tells you that most organizations are trying many things. And I think this goes to the theme that Mary highlighted at the beginning of this idea of now being in an experimentation phase where people are really trying things out, and hopefully they'll find them useful. Now, just one final remark on this slide from my end is I want to point you to the lowest rank use case, the legal contract case. I find that fascinating because in a way, it's the best of use cases and the worst of use cases. The best of use cases because a lot of legal contracting is basically, very copy and paste type activity. So you'd expect generative AI fed with, examples and data could do a very good job at that. At the same time, it's also the worst use case because accuracy is paramount and a mistake in a contract can be very costly. So it's interesting to see that while that probably is holding back some companies from using it, over 40% already are doing that today, or at least they're experimenting with it.
Yeah,
oh, sorry, go ahead. I wanted to add that what I found valuable about this particular page in the report, as you said, it's a very tight band, but I think it is a way in which companies, as they're searching, like, where should we apply AI, they can go to this list and see that, this is, we've surveyed 800 companies. And so this is a really good start to look and see which of these types of functions directly apply within their company, to go and look at that and see if in fact that they too can start with that particular use case. Because in this experimentation that we're in, you have to start to experiment, to learn and understand how it best applies within the company. So that's why I thought this list was useful in that regard.
And I look forward to watching this develop over the coming years and the waves that will be focused on it. I know just in the conversations with companies that, we have, at GBK, and I was Stefano and Mary, you're involved, in various conversations as well, is some of the obvious use cases are here maybe now obvious around content generation, summarization, et cetera. But more and more as these companies are beginning to adopt it, trying to leverage the tool for more insights and predictive power as they move forward. And it'll be really fascinating to watch if some of those use cases start to actually land and deliver ROI.
Especially like in that financial forecasting and planning and risk management.
Or even customer prediction, and better understanding and using insights from the market to better be able to communicate and engage with my customers and intended customers.
Okay, let me go to a different type of data, which is more, let's say, attitude or impression data. Here, we asked people about their perceptions of whether generative AI will enhance or replace employee skills. And so the numbers that I'm showing you here now are for 2023, and these are the percentages that are basically the top two boxes, people who agreed or strongly agreed with this idea that, generative AI will enhance employee skills and replace employee skills. Now, my point of view, when we were designing the first wave, we were talking about this, what would you expect? And I was expecting basically two segments of people. I was expecting pessimist and optimist, and that you would see some differentiation along those lines, and people would believe it would be, great for employees, and people would believe it would be maybe bad for employees. We don't see that in that actually in the 2023 data, when we were looking at the doing some modeling, basically these numbers were positively correlated, meaning people were differing in the extent to which they believed the technology was powerful. And if you believed it was powerful, which most people did, then you would believe it would both enhance and replace employee skills. And if you didn't believe it was powerful, you wouldn't believe it would do either. And so anyway, this is where we land in 2023. We have very high numbers, 80 and 75%, maybe a little bit more, beliefs about enhancement and replacement, but essentially almost matched. And so the question for me, one of the more interesting thing I was expecting when getting the new data was, how would this look like in 2024? And I'll invite you to just spend a minute thinking a little bit about what prediction you would make. Do you think these two will go up in 2024, both or one? and which one, or would they go down, and both, or one, or which one? I think it's interesting to try to guess, because I don't think it's obvious. And I was happy when I saw the results, and I'll tell you in a minute why. What we find, it's a big jump on beliefs about enhancement that goes up from 80 to 90%. That's a significant difference. And for replacement, we don't find an increase. If anything, we find a slight decrease, but just slight. But certainly the overall picture that you have now is that while in 2023, the two beliefs of enhancement and replacement were more or less matched, now in 2024, a big gap has opened up. And now basically almost everybody believes that Gen AI will enhance employee skills, and beliefs about replacement have not gone up, if anything, have gone slightly down. So I think that, paint a bit of a more optimistic maybe picture of the impact of Gen AI on labor that a lot of conversations that you read in the media might suggest. And so I show you some other additional data that bear the same conclusion out, which is basically attitudinal reaction or emotional reaction. So we also ask them how they feel about the technology. And what we see, again, looking at the year-on-year changes, we looked at the various emotions we measured, and we find a big decrease in curiosity. That, I think, makes sense. If you go from trial to experimentation, you're learning, right? So some of that curiosity is being satisfied, although the curiosity numbers are still very high. So people are still curious, but just a little bit less. And at the same time, as they satisfy the curiosity, they're also reporting being more pleased, more excited, less worried, and less skeptical. And all of those differences are significant. So basically, I think we are seeing the outline of, I think, a positive picture where companies are learning fast, and what they learn they like, meaning they find the technology to be powerful, but to be mostly complementary to the employee expertise, and not so much making people obsolete, but maybe making them more successful. And I think that's something to be quite optimistic about. So we'll see how this develops in future years, but at least it seems to be off to a promising start. Yeah.
So I have a question for both of you on that.
Yeah.
So when I look at this data, I express that there is, and I don't know if this is the right term or not, but there's a honeymoon period going on right now where there's definitely some skeptics and stuff, but to your point, there's more positive feelings from leaders and employees about the technology in the sense that we're in this experimentation. And so there's a little bit more freedom for people to see where it can be applied. How do you all think, where do you think this might be going? Do you think we'll continue to see this pleased and excitement, or do you think it's going to be a little erratic over the next couple of years of like employees accepting and then or resisting, or leaders similarly? I'm just kind of curious what both of your thoughts are, because I think it is very exciting. But what do we think might be coming into the future around that in those relationships?
What I would say is that it is possible there is a little bit of a hype going on, where people are reading so much, hyperbolic press about the performance of this technology, and that shows in some of these figures. But I don't believe that to be the main element, because if these numbers had been like this while we saw no change in actual adoption, I might have believed that. But because we see this huge jump in adoption, people are learning, and hopefully they are, making their own mind about how this is helping them, and this is what these numbers reflect. So while it is certainly, you can imagine, this cliche idea of the Gartner cycle, where there will be this trial disappointment looming. Certainly for investors, that may be certainly on the horizons, given the numbers that people see. But I am optimistic that this is, not just a momentary, like a hype type reaction. Although I'm very curious to see what the numbers are gonna look like in 2025.
Yeah, I'm with both of you. This is another area it'll be very interesting to watch as we continue, the survey on term. And we're seeing here is relative changes, and we're seeing very clear directional relative changes. But if I look at the absolute numbers, there's still a ways to go throughout the broader population to get them to the same level of pleased and excited and et cetera. And so I think it will take over time to do that. But it does seem like we've overcome that initial phase of the skepticism, worry, and challenge. And now people, and we'll talk about this a bit later in the conversation, are dealing with maybe some of the more practical matters of adoption within the organization to make this work and actually pay off on the expectations they're hoping to get out of it.
Yeah, it's make that a little bit of the harder part. If you're doing that adoption and implementation, the detailed that is really necessary to understand that. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I guess in the trial stage, people were wondering whether they should do this, and now
Yes.
in the experimental stage, they are more wondering how they should do it, and clearly that brings up a lot of other difficulties, and we'll see.
I think super key insight for leaders to note the excitement that employees have around this technology in terms of that experimentation. So, it'll be interesting to understand what, management, observations are in terms of if there's a way to take advantage of that hype and that excitement within those employees for the betterment of the company. So we'll see, right?
Yeah, and I think, when I present these results, sometimes people in the audience say, but don't you hear a lot of people being negative about generative AI? And it's always important to keep in mind who is the sample. These are senior decision makers at large US corporates. This is not a public opinion survey or general public. And so you can imagine that other groups of people who are more or less experienced with technology, mostly less, I would say, are going to have a slightly different reaction, maybe more influenced by what they see in a movie or read in social media rather than experience with actually making investments and trying this out. And so we'll see also how public opinion will evolve overall. That's also an interesting question, not something we can tackle with this data. It's not our scope, but certainly interesting too. Let's go to investments. And now, we want to keep it quite short, so we're not going to share most of the data that are in the report, and I really do urge you to download it. It's all for free, and it's very easy to do. And so take a look for yourself and see what else there is in there that might be useful to you, because I think there is a lot in the report. But just to pick another couple of things, this I think is quite interesting. We're looking at investments in Gen AI, and we see that the numbers have basically more than doubled since 2023, which again, goes to confirm this idea of going from trial to experimentation. It's getting bigger, basically. And in particular, I like to point you to the last two bars, where you see the share of organizations that are, investing more than 10 million a year in Gen AI. And now this is quite dramatic, right? So we went in 2023 from a small minority, only 7% of the sample, to now almost half. Right, so gigantic increase in the number of companies that are putting big money onto this. So I think it's interesting to see how that further evolves. And now the question then becomes, if they do spend quite a bit of money on this technology, how do they spend it? And you might, imagine many people might be leaving that, well, this is all money flowing to the big tech companies or the AI labs. This is all for, the OpenAIs and Anthropics and Googles and Microsoft of the world. And while they are indeed large beneficiaries of this spending, they are in fact not even the majority. We find in our survey that only about 1/3 of the total investments are going to the systems themselves, and that the majority of the spending is actually going to other things. And most interesting, I think, are training. So we have training divided by current employee training and hiring and onboarding. So either upskilling existing personnel or getting new personnel. And about almost a quarter of the investments are for consultants to help deploying and integrating. And so, it's interesting. Basically, this is another sign by which, you can see just what a pervasive general purpose technology this is. For other previous waves of technological disruption, you might have had a much higher number on this, where basically most of the spending was actually going to build the infrastructure or to get the system to work. While, in a technical sense, where here is more in a human sense, people are struggling to find, the right way of deploying, the right use cases, the right integration of human and AI capabilities. And I think that's why a lot of the investments are going to skilling and consulting. I believe I think it's a fascinating result. Now, let me pass it to Jeremy for a discussion of restrictions and policy.
Yeah, so when we're talking with some of those firms out there, and we see in the study, some of the things that popped out at me, particularly in the study, is just the smaller companies, for a variety of reasons you can see here, have fewer restrictions, and we have other data in the survey would show also have more usage, perhaps because of that. And so one question we'll have, and we'll want to watch, in the waves of this study is, does Gen AI provide some of those smaller competitors to perhaps find competitive advantage, and whether that's sustainable to be able to disrupt existing categories and incumbents? So something to be much to watch there. But then also what we're seeing, in fact, I'm at a conference right now where this is a big topic of discussion, is when it comes down to that practical adoption, like Mary had mentioned earlier, about how do we actually do this and what do we need to do. What's becoming really evident to some of the challenges, long life challenges within organizations around things like data security and employee permission and access is suddenly coming to bear and becoming a major issue discussion. In fact, I'm sure if you search Google on leaky co-pilots and some things like this, you will find all kinds of reports. Because what's happened in the past is that while these are long-lived issues that IT and business leaders have been trying to deal with over time, and by the way, while there were initial concerns about, well, wait a minute, on privacy and data protection, I don't want my data to be ingested into the base model. That most of that has been already resolved, and the enterprise paid models already respect, each organization's data privacy. The challenge is now internal, and those long life challenges around data protection and employee access need to be solved before organizations are going to be able to widely adopt these technologies. And I think some of what we're seeing here too, and then based on this and conversations with those organizations, is that those challenges are more profound and complex the larger the organization is. So I think a lot of opportunity to fix that and help those organizations, which will undoubtedly move to adopt this because of the benefits that we're already seeing.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I see with this is the fact that we did talk, the larger organizations are I don't know if this is the right word, but they're handicapped, for a variety of reasons, with a larger risk if this technology isn't implemented, with the right controls. But as it's moving quickly, sometimes one of the things I advise companies is within your industry, if you're one of the big behemoths, sometimes it might not be a bad idea to look at some of the smaller, more agile entities in the industry to see what use cases they're adopting more quickly to potentially, put that into, consideration, or looking at how they're potentially doing that, because they're able to experiment. They're further along in the experimentation curve than some of these larger companies, due to what you just pointed out in terms of the risk and the security and the data access. But I don't think that's going to be a big gap for very long. So again, interesting to find out next year where this all plays out specifically within this context.
Just to color this a bit, it's kind of, some of the anecdotes are interesting, I think, is that, we've probably undoubtedly lived through our life where it's very difficult to find organizational, corporate data. Where can I find that file? How do I get my hands on this information? And, even coming from a background in very large technology companies before this role, I can tell you the technology wasn't there to be able to provide that type of intelligence and insight at one's fingertip. We'll enter Gen AI, which is not only good about identifying all the documents that you have access to, it is also great at finding all the documents you had no idea you had access to and perhaps shouldn't have, and very helpful in providing insights to you that perhaps you weren't even asking for. So, some of these early adoption challenges around those issues about, asking perhaps a question to Copilot and getting an answer with perhaps some sensitive data you didn't even know you had and context, is interesting. But your point, Mary, is like, these are organizations, this is an overcomable challenge. Folks will fix it, I'm confident. And there's also a bunch of people out there, consultants and new technology companies out there to try to help them overcome it, of course.
Yeah, and the only other thing I would like to add to that is that with all those, the assistant, that Copilot or ChatGPT or Gemini could be your assistant in solving the problem, not only to identify the data sets, but being that extra co-colleague to help you think what's the best way to organize how to approach this, solving of the problem. So that, I think people are beginning to understand. This is where, Stefano probably has, he has much more experience than you and I around the whole behavior that might change of people within work as they look at this generative AI technology to assist them in that problem solving as well.
And I think we are coming now towards the end. I think this conversation to me highlighted a crucial part, basically, before I pass it over to Mary for the final remarks, that this idea that this technology requires both a top-down vision, where leaders have the authentic voice and the vision to inspire people to use this technology and embedding it into a lot of processes and make the investment necessary to support that adoption in terms of the technology, the compliance, and all of that, issues around security, for example, and access that we were talking about just now. At the same time, the technology also requires a lot of bottom-up energy, and you need to have individual users who discover for themselves how this can help them in their function, in their job, and their teams, and how they can invite this technology to work to help them achieve what they're trying to achieve. So I think you need to find a good combination of top-down policy and investments and bottom-up energy and experimentation. And I think the companies that meet in the middle, I think will be those who will be most successful.
That was a fantastic summary, and leads us to the conclusion here of our AI Horizons episode here. That one thing we should consider is looking forward to how leadership is going to, lead this technology across their companies. And we hope to be able to observe that again next year. If you would like more information about our report, please, you can look at this QR code. You can also go to ai@wharton.upenn.edu. and you get more information about the report. Again, I would like to thank Stefano Puntoni, Jeremy Korst, for endeavoring into starting these reports and this annual report in 2023, and now here in 2024. And we look forward to the results in 2025. But thank you, everyone, for joining us, and thank you, Stefano and Jeremy.
It's been a great collaboration, and I'd also encourage everybody, all three of us are very easily findable on LinkedIn. We love to engage on these topics. There's a lot more in the report itself, different cuts and questions, and so please take a look at it, and you know where to find us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you all.